One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that we can even go back to my research in law school on Aboriginal title, is we have, prior to the adoption of the Indian Gaming Act in the late 80s, is that we had this two parallel systems going along, that the American Indian was essentially isolated apart in his Indianness from the broader American society, if you will. So, for example, a Puyallup in 1972 could fish the Nisqually, have greater rights for that privilege than a non-Indian. But you know, he couldn't sell that right like every other right any American has to someone else who has more of an interest. So if I want to sell my Indian right to fish at the Nisqually and go to law school or go to medical school with the proceeds, I couldn't do that. And so you end up with this society that was so focused on keeping the Indian people on the reservation. And of course, on the reservation, in many respects, was a horrible existence. I'm speaking of the 60s and 70s. I mean, there were very, very few reservations in this country anywhere that had any kind of an economic employment base. And so what do you do? Well, you know, we can go to Alaska. Pretty good example. Essentially, you've got 8 months a year in Alaska with nothing to do. Well, if you got nothing to do, what do? Well, you drink a lot. And you know, in 1968, 65, the Alaska Native was looked at fairly extensively. Average midterm third grade education. Life expectancy 35 years of age. Let's see, 90% unemployment rates. I mean, you can just go through the litany of facts and figures, and it just is oppressive. And now, how do you deal with these problems? I mean, that's what United Indians was. There's so many expatriate reservation Indians that couldn't live there. Well, they can't live in Seattle either. And, you know, and Vietnam created a lot of veterans that left the reservations, came home, didn't want to go back to the reservation where they had some military skills, but they had no place to use that stuff on the reservation. And so they ended up in Seattle. Well, you had small native, you know, it's much like almost every city in the country. You have your ethnic neighborhoods. Well, White Center's got some, to this day, Indian neighborhoods. You know, there's Samoan neighborhoods. There's, and which, by the way, I happen to think is a very healthy thing. It disturbs me that some of our aggressive anti-discrimination stuff makes it very difficult to maintain ethnic neighborhoods. There's some good aspects to that. But anyway, bottom line of it is at that time, it was dealing with many undealable problems. Now, it's now 2006. We're in year 18 of the Indian Gaming Act. Well, you know, Alaska had the advent of the Claims Act in 1971, and over the next 30 years, a lot of that money that brought, as I said earlier in the interview, the Alaska Natives are the strongest political group in the state today, despite Ted Stevens. But in the lower, we're ending up now, you know, this past year, Indian gaming went past Vegas in terms of gross revenues. Boggles the mind. And you now have an economic base in Alaska, based in the corporations following the Claims Act, and probably somewhere around half of the stateside Indians have created these gaming systems that are extremely valuable. And over time, a lot of the urban reservation conflict is going to dissipate.